Most IVF cycles fail, and most IVF cycles have been failing for 30 years. And we just keep promising, I think, women very false hopes that's not based, it's not backed by any of the data. The longer term risks are the links to fertility drugs and various cancers. And, there's links to Clomid in the medical literature for thyroid cancer. There's links to non-lymphoma, Hodgkin's, another cancer. There's obviously the breast cancer linkage. There's also the fact that women who are conceiving their children through IVF, have higher rates of high-risk pregnancies.
I mean, we are exchanging money, and whether you want to call it expenses or payment or fees or, compensation or whatever you want to name it, there is an exchange of huge amount of money, and the product, the deliverable, is the baby. That's selling babies.
And then there's all kinds of unknown, because the dirty little secret is we don't try to keep women. Once we have their eggs, once we're done with them, they're forgotten.
Your work and documentaries have pretty much ensured that you will be promptly taken off any Christmas card sort of list of many, many industries that make plenty of money. And one of these documentaries was called The Exploitation. So can you tell us what is the exploitation?
Well, that was my first documentary film that I did 100% on my own. And I was involved very heavily in the debate in my state, California, around allowing women to sell their eggs for scientific research. And in my writing and my speaking out about the risks to young women who are going to be paid to sell their eggs, I had a lot of women contact me who had been paid to sell their eggs to help people have babies. And the reason they contacted me was they just wanted to talk about all the things that had gone wrong with their health. And so in meeting so many women who found me, I decided to make this documentary film because I think most people don't understand that it's risky to the woman's health. I think people go, oh, it's like organ donation. Oh, it's like blood donation. It's helping people. What could be wrong? And so it was in that kind of context of speaking out about targeting women for their eggs for research that I focused on the fertility industry.
Okay. I think a lot hides behind the words that we use. We always give variety of medical treatments a rather innocent sounding name. And, egg donation, it sounds simple. So do you actually want to tell us what does it entail and where can it potentially carry the risks?
Sure. Well, it carries the risks in the short-term health of the woman, and it carries the risks in the longer-term health of the woman. So short-term, a young woman is put on a cocktail, if you will, of medication. First, she's put on a drug called Lupron. And Lupron puts the ovaries into a medical menopause. It puts the ovaries to sleep. We use Lupron to block puberty in little children, which is very controversial, of course, as it should be. So the woman is first put on Lupron. Then once her cycle is synced up with the woman she's selling her eggs to, because you have to synchronize two women's fertility cycles. Once she's properly blocked and her ovarian function is stopped, then she's switched to a different regime of fertility drugs that cause her ovaries to hyperstimulate, produce lots and lots of eggs. Because if you're paying a woman $10,000, you don't want one egg. You want a lot of eggs because fertility treatments are expensive. So in this process of super ovulating her, there's all the short-term risks that come with what they call ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. So you'll see these women talking about how their ovaries get so big They're so swollen. They're full of fluid because they're producing lots and lots of eggs. Like a couple of women in the film exploitation, one produced 60 eggs in one cycle. And another woman was in the 20s. So their ovaries get so big and they're so full of fluid that this can cause all kinds of problems. It can cause stroke, because there's so much fluid, there's so much swelling, and two women in the film actually did have strokes. It can cause torsioned ovaries. One of the women in the film had a torsioned ovary, which is the fallopian tube gets kinked like a garden hose. And that went undiagnosed for several weeks until they finally discovered that that's what her problem was. And she lost an ovary. She had to go back and have surgery. The longer term risks are the links to fertility drugs and various cancers. My colleagues and I have published in the medical literature a case report of 5 otherwise healthy young women who went on as young women and got breast cancer. And the commonality was that they were all egg donors, egg sellers. And so, we know that we need to better understand and properly understand the links between these procedures and cancer. And obviously, loss of fertility. The 2 women in exploitation who had strokes lost their ability to ever conceive their own children. So, and then there's all kinds of unknown, because the dirty little secret is we don't track these women. Once we have their eggs, once we're done with them, they're forgotten. So we don't know how many of these women who are selling their eggs today in the United States or all around the world, are going on and having trouble with their own fertility, are going on and having trouble with, cancer diagnosis.
You started talking about when you came across of this issue, it was mainly eggs donated for research, but we've moved on from that point. I think it's quite safe to say. And for any woman probably in her mid-20s, if that young woman hasn't been targeted on Facebook with the ads of giving the wonderful gift of life to another person by the means of egg donation, I would be surprised, because I certainly was when I was younger. And in the UK especially, it's actually illegal to be paid for it. So women are only compensated the costs, which are £750, which is not a big price tag for a long list of potential side effects. So what is it like in States in terms of the payments that women are offered?
Well, they're paid a lot. I mean, they're certainly paid a lot more than £700. But to be fair, if you're a poor, struggling young girl in the United Kingdom and you're not aware of the complications or the risks or the potential harms, you might say, £700 is a nice little chunk of money, and I can sell my eggs again. It's not like I can only do this one time. It's like I can only sell my kidney once because I need the other one to live. Women do have not unlimited eggs, but in the young woman's mind, she thinks that this is something that she could do repeatedly, and that could really help her financially. But in the United States, it is a lot more compensation. So, and it's not standardized. So, what a young girl can make in California is a lot more than a woman who could make in, say, you know, Kansas or Alabama. A wealthier state attracts wealthier clients who are much more selective. So we have like Stanford University, who's really close to where I live, and the University of California, Berkeley. So these are, universities that have very intelligent young women, probably from pretty good backgrounds. And it's not uncommon to see ads in their university papers offering them thousands and thousands of dollars because the clients want an elite donor or a particular kind of donor. And there's no, in the United States, there's no requirement that ads place any kind of warnings or problems like, smoking. You buy a pack of cigarettes and it will say in the United States that, the cigarette smoking has proven to cause lung cancer. There's no warning on the ads that, these girls see in their university papers or in their Facebook ads that they, get targeted with.
That's so interesting, because introducing of money, especially if it's a large amount, really starts to push at the ethics of the entire thing, because an easier argument could be made if it's just completely ethical, altruism and all that, trying to help others. But the introducing large sums of money to the demographic, which clearly, just by their age, is not going to be rich or particularly wealthy or, cash rich, is just feels very exploitative, doesn't it?
Well, and my background is in nursing, so I understand, the proper function of informed consent. And even if young girls, excuse me, even if young girls are told, you may have a stroke, you may develop breast cancer down the road, you may never be able to have children of your own. When a young woman who needs the money is offered $10,000, she might say, like the cigarette smoker, I won't be that person that has a stroke. I won't be the person that gets cancer. That won't happen to me. And I'm willing to take that risk because the money incentive. So in informed consent, in the medical model that should be practiced, is there should be absolutely no financial compensation that's on the table that's being offered. And when you think about it, an egg donor, and I don't like using the word donor, vendor, provider, seller, this woman is not a patient. This doctor is encouraging her with money to take medication she has no need to take. It'd be like going to a doctor and he says, well, you don't have cancer, but I need you to take chemotherapy, and I'm going to offer you $25,000 to take chemotherapy because I'm involved in research that wants to understand, how this particular chemotherapy drug, whatever, works in you. You would say, that's just crazy. Why are doctors asking young girls who are healthy to take very powerful drugs? And we know these drugs have risks. We know they have risks to women who are infertile that take them for their own bodies to try to have their own children. So it doesn't sit well at all. And we know, because it is a big fertility money industry, if we don't pay women, they're not going to be just giving their eggs away for free.
I think once you especially know what's involved, the egg donation sounds really innocent and, something quick that you can just do, but the actual retrieval process is, yeah, I mean, not straightforward at all. And I think the risks that it carry. The interesting thing was I was offered that, you see. I mean, I was targeted for a couple of years with the ads. I remember that, because I even remember considering it and thinking, oh, that would be a nice thing to do for somebody. Like, it was just like a random thought when I saw it. Zero consideration for the fact that would be my baby that I would then end up having out in the world, not knowing where it is, which family it was actually born, whether it's okay. And I don't think you think about these things until you actually have a child and you know what it feels like. But then I was actually offered it because I was diagnosed with very aggressive form of cancer when I was 26.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And there was, so it's okay. It's actually, in a really twisted way, did me good in a long term. Changed my life completely. But at the time, it was the wrong sort of side of the cycle as well. I sort of remember them saying that we would need to wait a little bit, and my consultants were sort of tentatively asking whether I would be interested in freezing eggs, but at the same time sort of saying that we really don't really have time to delay because I had multiple tumors that were spreading. So, and again, I remember them offering. We decided not to go with it. I was told that I might not be able to have my children after the chemo and the radiotherapy and all that. But at no point did they actually mention the side effects of the actual egg retrieval, and then the potential dance of a very powerful, or giving someone that's just been diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer a powerful cocktail of hormones, delaying the treatment. I mean, I only think about it now because I think about these issues, but it doesn't strike me as there is a lot of research in that field. It all feels like a bit of tossing the coin and seeing what happens.
And that's very true. We use the saying in the United States, throwing spaghetti on the wall and seeing what sticks. It doesn't feel very scientific. It's just like, and you hear women, especially if you just hear the stories or speak to women who their own story has been they've struggled with their own fertility, and these women describe, being put on a super highway that has no off ramps. The doctor's like, we're going to try this, and it doesn't work. You have a failed cycle. We're going to try this. Well, we're going to try this medication. We're going to try this, and it doesn't feel like it has any kind of, like I said, there's no off ramps. So, like, how can we stop? This doesn't seem to be working, doctor. And I don't think this is good for my body, what you're doing, and the drugs that you're putting in me, keep going through these egg retrievals and trying to create embryos and then trying to transfer them back and have a healthy pregnancy. And when you think about, where I live, because I live very close to the Silicon Valley, and all these young women who work for big high-tech companies like Facebook and LinkedIn, they're being offered as an employee benefit to freeze and bank their eggs, so they can keep working and then have their children when they're, I don't know, 40 or something. But, most IVF cycles fail, and most IVF cycles have been failing for 30 years, and we just keep promising, I think, women very false hopes. It's not backed by any of the data. The data that we do have still continues to show that most IVF cycles fail. And most women will spend tens of thousands of dollars trying to get a baby, and a lot of them never get a baby.
Mm. And I think it is a balance of two very different needs, because I can definitely understand, some women's desperation to have a child when she can't have one. And perhaps the IVF she feels is her only route. But I also think that this whole thing about hiding the side effects, that makes me a little bit uncomfortable. You see, when I was doing a little bit of digging earlier on to prepare for the conversation with you, I was like, okay, well, I will dig on the website of the main sort of, the big fertility companies in the UK, just to see how easy it is to find the side effects. Well, out of 4 websites that I've dug, and I've spent hour looking for the information, I found one leaflet on one website, and it was not easy to find whatsoever. Now, the interesting effect, the interesting things, and they write a lot of things about it. But in that particular pamphlet, they basically mentioned that ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, so this is what you were talking about earlier on, is the most serious side effect of treatment and occurs in about 1 to 100 women. They then say that there is a very small risk, about 1 in 2,000, of bleeding or infection as a result of egg collection. And then in the long-term risks, here is something that's very, very interesting, bearing in mind the research that you've done. There are no reported long-term risks to your health following egg donation. Also, there should be no effect on your future fertility as a result of donating eggs.
Yeah, well, that's nice. You can say all of that, but they don't have to prove it. Back to just the disingenuous wording that they have around ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. If you study just ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, it's usually classified into mild, moderate, severe. You have a mild case of it, you have a moderate case, you have a severe. Usually women that have a severe case, they often have to be hospitalized. Moderate, maybe they have to have some fluid drained, but they can do that in the emergency room or outpatient. But it's all subjective. somebody might say this is a moderate case, and somebody else might say, no, this is a severe case. And somebody might say, oh, no, it's a mild case. There's no science that says this is the parameters for when we say it's mild, moderate, severe. And there's so much, especially in egg donors, that it's never reported, it's never captured. So when these websites say it's a very rare occurrence, it's because a lot of these young girls that are, they're at home, they're college students, they call the fertility doctor and they go, I can't put my pants on, I feel like I'm pregnant. That doesn't get reported anywhere. These are women that are told, oh, just drink a lot of Gatorade because Gatorade will help draw the fluid out of your belly and redistribute it and help you, go to the bathroom and get rid. So there's no really serious way of capturing all these cases that happen all the time. And, back to the money part of it, I too, like you said earlier, I tell women all the time, you're not donating your eggs, you're selling your children. These are children that are going to grow up one day. They're going to go to 23andMe. They're going to get a DNA test. And they're going to realize, oh, my mother, who I thought was my mother, isn't my mother. And they're going to come looking for you. And they're going to come looking for their siblings and, their family.
But I think as well, like the young women that haven't had children yet, they will not know what it's like until they have a child. And I think there should be way more oversight from the government to essentially stop young, stupid people that we all were, and we still are to a certain degree, stop making really dumb mistakes that might cost you a lot. But I think obviously there is the interesting connection of the egg donation, because there is obviously an industry that has got a lot of interest, let's say, tied up in supply of young fertile eggs. And there are obviously IVF women that are going through this treatment because they want to have a child. But the treatment, the actual egg donation part of it, is pretty similar when you are actually doing the IVF. So can you actually tell us, like, at what stage of the process the differences start to sort of manifest?
Well, there really isn't a big difference. I think maybe one of the biggest differences, and maybe the only difference, is that the amount of drugs the infertile woman might take. Back to they want a lot of eggs from an egg donor. If you're going to pay a woman $10,000, you don't want one egg that she naturally just is going to ovulate and release each month and capture that. You're going to want to get a lot of eggs. And we know that when you super ovulate and you create a lot of eggs, you get poor quality eggs. It's just like trying to force your vegetables to grow in your garden. You're not going to get really good vegetables, but you're going to get your vegetables. So the patient model, the woman who's infertile, who's seen more as a patient, she might be given lower dosages of fertility drugs because we don't want necessarily 10 eggs from her. We want maybe 3 or 4, in the hopes that we can get her a baby eventually. But again, it's a highly failed enterprise, no matter which woman you're looking at. And I do think because we just don't study it. Like, I often wonder, like, I know one woman who was an egg donor many, many, many times. And she's written a book, The Confessions of a Serial Egg Donor. I wonder what is the compounded effect of a healthy woman who's repeatedly taking these drugs over and over again and doing this over and over again. And similarly, the infertile woman who also tries IVF 6, 7, 8 times because it keeps failing. Is there anything that we could learn in the data that would show, does that put women at higher risk? Or is a woman who does 2 cycles of IVF, says it failed, I ran out of money, I can't do it anymore, is she less at risk because she hasn't done it so many times? How much time is between each cycle? When a woman who's an egg donor, what if she does this 10 times in 1 year? Is that different than an egg donor who does it 3 times in a year? We don't know those kind of things. We know that if somebody smokes 3 packs a day of cigarettes versus one cigarette a day, that risk is different. And we don't know that kind of information. And so I'm curious about that. But what I really want to, say before we end our conversation, I know we're not done yet, but, we've stopped looking at why women men too, are having trouble conceiving. And we don't even look at that
Yeah.
anymore. We don't look at what's called restorative reproductive medicine, where we actually try to understand what is going on with this male body, this female body, and what can we do to fix the problem, versus IVF, which is just a workaround. We can just ignore the problem and just take this little side road over here. And I'm like, I'd much rather spend energy, because I think that's better for women's health. I think that's better for children's health. So, but that doesn't make people money. So in the US, there's no
No,
money.
but I also think that I'm not sure whether they are theories already or still hypotheses at this moment in time, but I think some of the, let's call them theories, that are flying around when it comes to, for example, I mean, the male fertility it's been dropping from one cliff onto the next one, and it's just all, a very quick journey down, essentially. I think perhaps with women, the data is a little bit more muddied, because we know that women are delaying motherhood for a variety of other reasons. We're not going to get into them. But the data on male fertility, the testosterone, the sperm counts, the motility, the usual indicators are pretty scary. And I think one of the hypotheses that was presented was, for example, the fact that the estrogen is present in the water supply, all sorts of drugs, the antidepressants. We are not actually that good at filtering certain drugs out of our environment. And obviously, many, many women are on the pill. So that just becomes a background noise that, to be honest with you, even if someone wanted to study that, I would question whether they would be allowed. Because
Well,
we know that there is conflict of interest behind the scenes with certain research papers. And perhaps that's why nobody's looking at it.
yeah. Well,
On the
and
other
plus,
hand, the IVF is there to make loads of people money, so why not?
well, and IVF gives you the sense of something's being done. Well, we're doing something to try to fix this problem, versus studying it. You have to wait. You have to wait for the study to be done. You have to wait for the data to be analyzed. You have to wait for the reports to come out. And we're very impatient, today. We want things, really quick. And, to be fair, my colleagues and I have done our own peer-reviewed published research on surrogacy, and it's very expensive to do studies. It's not cheap. And so you have to, I think if you wanted to do such a study, you'd have to be at maybe a university, or you'd have to be able to get federal grants to pay you to be able to do this kind of research. But it's not lucrative. It's not sexy, to try to find out. And, it would be really hard because, as you said, there's so many compounding factors that, we are not rabbits. The human being is not a rabbit. It's amazing that we can even conceive, child. We can only have usually one in a year's time, because, our fertility is very fragile. And I'm always trying to educate young women, because I'm so amazed at the 21st century and our ability to find anything out on the internet, how little women even understand their own menstrual cycle, their own fertility awareness. When am I able to conceive? When am I ovulating? Am I ovulating? Where there's just no lack of even any kind of awareness about how their own individual body works. So women do think silly things like, I can have my children when I'm 45. No, you can't. Maybe you're one of the outliers, and there's a lot of women who, and when I say women, obviously this is a couple situation, but they try 3 or 4 months to conceive and they don't get pregnant. And so the first thing their doctor says is, go see the fertility specialist. And when in fact, when you
Mm-hmm.
look at 3 or 4 months of trying to conceive, you might have just never had intercourse when you were fertile. You might have just missed the window and there's absolutely nothing wrong. But the next thing you know, you're being worked up for infertility.
Diet, stress. I think there is just so many complicated factors that all of this just kind of feels like we are trying to, carry out like brain surgery with an axe and a massive saw. That's what it feels like, straight from the beginning to the end, because obviously, and this will be very emotive subject to many, because obviously the fact that the IVF is there has saved plenty of couples a heartbreak. It spared them plenty of pain and grief that, they've actually managed to have a child. I think all of us know someone that used IVF and they finally had that baby that they so wanted. We also know of women that have spent thousands of pounds trying, are then left with complicated, perhaps medical issues that nobody is really interested in. So the industry has got so many different like competing aspects to it. But let's talk about the actual side effects for both women and then children that have been created by those reproductive technologies. What do we know?
All right, so when we look at the infertile woman who's taking fertility drugs in order to try to conceive, we know that there's links to cancer in the medical literature for women that take Clomid has a link to thyroid cancer. There's links to non-lymphoma Hodgkin's disease, which is a cancer. There's links to breast cancer. And we know that these are oftentimes higher risk pregnancies. So a woman who's carrying a baby created through assisted reproductive technology may be at higher risk of short-term preterm birth, a low weight baby, or miscarriage rates. And we're just now starting to get some really good studies that are coming out on the children that are created through assisted reproductive technology. And I think that's because we've been doing IVF for quite some time now. So we're finally starting to get large enough sample sizes of children. For example, we're seeing higher rates of heart disease in children that are created through assisted reproductive technology. And all the complications that come from being a preterm, low weight, premature baby, those can be complications that are short term, impacting the baby, as well as longer term if the child just has developmental problems because of being a premature birth. But what's interesting to me is we don't yet know why is that. Is it because we had an infertile couple who wasn't going to be able to conceive because of the fertility problem, and we've ignored that problem and created children anyway, and so that children is having problems because, if you believe evolutionary, this is a people that through evolution wouldn't have been able to conceive, but science has said, well, we're better than you, we're smarter than you, so we're going to make these couple a baby anyway. So is that why the child is having these problems? Is it because of the technique? We know that ICSI, which is where they take the sperm and they actually, with a needle, inject it into the egg. There's plenty of research that we now have that shows that ICSI is very problematic to that child in creating health complications in children that are created through ICSI. So in the US, we've really backed off of using ICSI all the time. It used to be just for men that had low sperm count, or they didn't
Mm-hmm.
swim and they couldn't get to their destination, so we would help them. But then it became, because we're all about efficiency, we just said, oh, let's just use ICSI all the time. And then we started seeing problems in the children that were born through ICSI. So we've kind of backed off from that. But again, we don't know yet what we don't know. So why is it that these children are having problems? Is it the technique? Is it because this is a couple that shouldn't have been able through, natural selection to be able to conceive? Or is it a combination of both? There's one really great study that looks at the embryo and the environment And it talks about the stress that a human embryo is under in the laboratory. When you think about it, the human embryo is normally in a quiet little dark womb. And here it is in a laboratory. It's exposed to the environment. It's exposed to noise. It's exposed to light. It's exposed to oxygen at a level that it wouldn't be exposed to in the womb. And so there's all that stuff that's happening on this tiny little embryonic, being, and we don't know what that translates to. Is that what's causing the problems? That this is an unnatural environment that this embryo is starting out in. So there's too many unknowns, and like you said, there's not a lot of interest to study it.
There was, again, because I was trying to find definitive research that would point out to actually what could be, the problems for both mother and children. And the two interesting papers that I found, I mean, they really hit me because they fly in complete opposite to each other in terms of their recommendation. So the first one of them was actually looking specifically at that. It was looking at where is it? There you go. The current status of IVF. Are we putting the needs of the individual first? And now, actually, let's start with the other one. The longer-term effects of IVF on offspring from childhood to adolescence. And it talks about a lot of things, and it lists just a lot of medical problems that have been reported. Now, right towards the end, it says studies in this field come with many limitations. Low numbers of participants is one of the major limitations. And then studies are often limited by short follow-up periods because of the difficulty and cost involved in longitudinal studies. And then, in addition, the rapid changes over time in IVF technologies limit the significance of long-term findings. We also have another paper that was published the year after that ends up with, and that one was the current status of IVF, are we putting the needs of the individual first? Interesting that they're just looking at the individual rather than the children as well. But they actually end with the field of fertility medicine must be encouraged to continue to innovate, invent, and assess the process of IVF. The individuals who use IVF should be at the heart of every decision made. So, we've got the researchers that admit that we don't have the data that is good, decent, decisive, simply because the technologies are evolving, whilst with another breath saying the technology must evolve. I'm kind of just ending up with a little bit of strange feeling about this whole industry. Like, It really does feel like they don't actually know, but they're going to continue with it anyway.
Well, and what does it mean to continually innovate? In San Francisco, very near where I live, there's a lot of venture capitalist funding going into innovation and reproductive technologies. So they're forging ahead on manufacturing human eggs and manufacturing human sperm and artificial wombs and all that. Is that what we mean by innovation? And I think of your wonderful Mary Harrington in England, who's always, kind of critiquing progress for progress sake. Is progress just always good? Well, no, because if it's progress headed in a wrong direction, but the sense of progress because it's forward, it's momentum, it's got to be good. And no, a lot of progress isn't good. Back to studies, we have a great, and I'll send you the link so you can put it in your show notes. But
That would be
Callie
great.
Fell, who I work with, we have a great comprehensive report on assisted reproductive technology that has all the studies that we have compiled that specifically look at, are you thinking about selling your eggs? Here's the studies that you need to consider. Are you thinking about hiring a surrogate or being a surrogate? Here's the studies. And so there's a lot of links to really good studies that have, that have been done that have shown the problems. The problem is that we haven't done anything to address the problem. We haven't pumped the brakes.
Yeah, and I think we are also piling up different technologies that, I mean, we pretend we understand it, but we really don't, and layering them on top of one another. And I mean, you see it in the gender madness. We see it in the surrogacy, where we are piling up not only the complications of actually severing the mother-child bond, but then also the potential health implications of the actual technologies that we use. And I think something that's particularly worrying is this just constant push at any cost to maximize the freedom, however bizarre, of a individual, and to hell with the rest. And I think you gave the really good example that can be seen in some perhaps celebrity like gay couples that really do try and mix and match to get the babies that they want. But then we don't really think about what that looks like. And I think that comes up really quite clearly with surrogacy. So do you want to just explain a little bit about the more bizarre surrogacy arrangements? Because currently surrogacy isn't huge in the UK, but there is a massive push to make it like
Yeah.
the one that you've got in certain states.
Yeah, and I mean that's the rub that we have. A lot of people in Europe, because a lot of European countries don't allow surrogacy. I was just in Rome a few weeks ago, and I'm going back to Rome in a few more weeks to speak at a conference both on surrogacy, because the Italian government is getting ready to close their travel ban. So you can't do surrogacy in Italy, but they're going to close the ban so you cannot travel and rent wombs. So I'm thrilled with that. But a lot of European countries that are being pressured to liberalize surrogacy laws, point to America as well. It's working just great in America, which is obviously people haven't done any bit of research. Just go on Instagram and you can see how badly surrogacy is working here. I mean, I posted a post just yesterday, and it's a woman who's in California. She's in her 24th week of a pregnancy for a single man in China. And she's distressed because she's never seen this man. She's never met this man. This man is not even going to be in America and California when the baby's born. He's hiring somebody who will come to California, pick up the baby, and bring the baby to China. And she's like, I don't feel comfortable about this. What do I do? And there was a great study that just came out in fertility and sterility. Well, it's not really a study, it's a report of data. And it's looking at the international travel to the United States, because so many countries ban this. They come here, right? This article reported that almost 43% of international surrogacy people coming are single men over 40 years of age, predominantly from China. And to me, that's like 3 red flags. Why would a single man who's in his 40s come from a different country to buy babies? I mean, it's just like red flag, red flag, red flag. But, surrogacy, our own data, our own research shows that surrogate pregnancy is very, very high risk, much higher risk than a natural pregnancy. And nobody even thinks that that's the case, because they think one pregnancy is the same as another pregnancy. And that's not true. It's not true. So it's risky to mother, it's risky to baby, it's exploitative. I mean, I always say there's a million reasons to tell people why they should oppose surrogacy.
I think it's the reasons for the surrogacy presenting problems is probably, again, multifold, because there will be factors affecting factors, and a little bit like a butterfly effect going on in multiple places. But one of the things that we know is, even if you've got a normal pregnancy, the mother's body has to suppress its immune system, because at the end of the day, that baby is still 50% not hers. So this is in normal circumstances. And then So then what then happens to that mother's immune system when she's got an egg that isn't hers and perhaps is carrying two babies by two different fathers? You've got so many more complications there. And then I know that you've spoken a lot about the contracts of surrogacy, and part of the meddling of the DNA and things like that is to essentially lock the women that give birth into being, or having to be forced to follow the instructions from the intended parents.
Yeah, I mean, again, that's a claim that's made, is that how surrogacy operates in the United States protects everybody because we have these laws and these contracts, so everybody's protected, all the stakeholders are protected. And if you read any of the laws or you read any of the contracts, which I read all the time, it's just not true. The laws and the contracts protect the moneyed interest. They protect the buyer. And if you read any surrogate contract, if she doesn't obey, if she doesn't comply, if she doesn't follow instructions, she will be in breach of contract and she will be penalized. She'll either be, sued or have to pay the money back, or there's some kind of penalties, are always attached for non-compliance. Um, and so, I'm always thrilled that so far, France still does not allow surrogacy. Germany doesn't allow it. Spain doesn't allow it. Italy doesn't allow it. But I keep saying, we need, in the U.S., we need to close our borders, because if we closed our borders, that would just shrink a lot of the problems. It wouldn't solve the problems, but it would at least make our problems with fighting surrogacy and egg trafficking just within our 50 states. And, America's huge. So, the few people like me that are working to abolish surrogacy and shut down the egg trade, we have our hands full. But if we only had to manage America, yeah, that would make it a little bit easier.
Yeah, but I do find it surprising how we don't see the risks. Are we really that blinded by the compassion? Because, there used to be the saying that, if it quacks like a duck, then it's a duck. I mean, we are exchanging money, and whether you want to call it expenses or payment or fees or, compensation or whatever you want to name it, there is an exchange of huge amount of money, and the product, the deliverable, is the baby. That's selling
Yeah,
babies. Like, we already have words for it. I Yeah, I think the surrogacy, almost like we are trying to meddle with what it actually is.
yeah. And when you look at like organ donation, I think almost the whole entire world does not allow for the buying and selling of organs. And we don't have compassion for the fact that about every 13 minutes in the United States, somebody dies waiting for an organ. These are real life people who are sick and could be perhaps saved and cured and treated if we could start buying and selling kidneys. You know, do we not have compassion for those people? I mean, I think we do, but when it comes to babies and somebody who can, and you're not going to die if you can't have a baby. I'm very sympathetic to people who want children.
Mm.
I'm very sympathetic to people who can't have children. I'm very sympathetic to all that. But on the other hand, you're not going to die if you can't have a child. You might have a broken heart, but why do we allow somebody to not be able to buy an organ in order to save their life, but will allow somebody to harm another woman in order to have a baby? Doesn't make sense to me.
Something came up to me when you were talking about comparing sort of surrogacy to donating an organ. The, the stakes are so much higher. Ask any parent whether they would give up their life for their child, and they will say absolutely, without any even considering for it. How many people would give up their life for a kidney or one of their kidneys? not many, because they know they can live without it. And it's it yeah, I mean, I'm really not sold by the whole idea, and I'm really happy that you are talking about it. But as you know, anyone that dares to limit anyone's sort of bizarre demands for freedom comes under a lot of scrutiny and criticism. So, what has been a reaction to your work in general?
Well, I think it's mixed. I mean, obviously, I have my share of fans, which is why I do a lot of podcasts, and people invite me to come on and talk. I just come back from Rome. I'm getting ready to go back to Rome again to speak. So, I have a message that resonates with a lot of people who want to hear what I have to say. Yes, I have my critics though too. Big fertility is not a fan of mine. Because I'm always taking a whack at their profits and unethical practices of big fertility. But I don't care. That doesn't stop me from doing what I know is right to do. At the end of the day, I have a strong sense of affinity to maternal child health, to women's health, to children's health. I was a pediatric nurse for many, many years. I am a woman. I have 3 daughters. Um, and I don't like to see injustice done at the hands of medicine. I take seriously do no harm. Doctor, do no harm. And that means to a woman who you want her eggs or you want to rent her womb.
Oh, we seems to be moving so quickly and so far away from that
Yeah.
simple principle. And I think just in general, there is the medical system seems to be very, very ready to just have an army of hormones to use on people to meddle with their futures without clearly much evidence behind it. And I know that you are involved in the gender discussion as well. You must know about the Cass review that was published in the UK, that despite many of the trans sort of activist communities denying what it says, it was just a dreadful hit for everything that they were doing. And there is just not enough evidence for using these powerful medications where we don't actually know what they're doing. We often just don't really know the side effects, and yet we seem to be using them. And this is done by people that were supposed to help.
Yeah.
And it just provides so many complications to the industry as a whole.
Yeah. I'm going to have to get off the call and just
Yeah, no problem. The last question is, so, for the people that want to follow your work and find your documentaries, where can they find you?
Well, first, all of our documentaries are free, so I don't want anybody to think I'm trying to sell them movies. They're all on our website, on YouTube. The Center for Bioethics and Culture Network is our YouTube channel, and people, follow me on Twitter just at my name, Jennifer Lahl, and that's the best way because I'm most active on Twitter.
Jennifer, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Wisdom Rebellion. Before you go, if you enjoyed the conversation, please consider subscribing. It massively helps with keeping the show on the road so we can all build a wiser world together. And if you loved this video, you will also love this one. I'll see you there.